Radio. This is RPPR episode 179, Blades in the Dark, or Heists 1 or 2. Following on with our previous episode about heists in sort of a generic level. Since that episode, I've been running a Blades in the Dark campaign with some of the RPPR cast, including Aaron and Bill, who are here. And also, we have another special guest, Jeff Barber, who's run his own Blades in the Dark campaign that I played in one game of. And so we still have heists on the mind, but I want to explore the system and the setting of Blades in the Dark specifically, because it's a very fun game. And I have but it's not perfect. So we'll sort of go into its strong points and sort of its weak points. But before we get into that, I do have a bit of news. Again, I want to apologize for all RPPR patrons why I was late with this month's After Hours episode. But it is up. It was a very good episode. And I will have August's After Hours episode up pretty early. I already have it planned and we should be recording it soon. But again, I had some real life stuff to take care of and I was a bit distracted, but I'm back on schedule for it and we should be on a normal cycle for everything. And also we are still streaming weird movies and videos and stuff on the RPPR Discord every week. If you want, I'm not going to announce it every single time when we're doing it, but I will put the announcement as a pinned message on main. So if you go to the main channel on the RPPR Patreon Discord and look under pinned messages, it'll have the when and where, or you can just ask, just at me, feel free to at me, and I will be happy to tell you when our next thing is. Like I said, I've done my movie, Motorhome from Hell. I've done my parents' movie, Copperhead. Those will probably come up again sooner or later, but we're watching some real interesting stuff and having a good time doing that. And that is just going to be weekly because turns out there's a lot of weird stuff to watch. We're all having a good time doing it. So I hope
you want to be a
us.
Connoisseur of Grandpa Teethwater, become with
Grandpa
us.
Teethwater. Yeah. What do you mean by that? You'll have to watch to find out. Thank you, Aaron, for these little edits. Those are fun. And what else? Also, Night Clerk Radio. We just posted our episode not too long ago on hauntology. It's very good. And if you listen to us at the very beginning and you didn't quite like it because of the editing style, it was a bit too, some people sort of mentioned it was a little too abrupt and a little too fast paced. We've refined our editing style. Actually, well, Burke has, because Burke has been editing it. Thank you, Burke, my co-host for Night Clerk Radio. So
the algorithm has been fired.
Yeah, the algorithm has been fired. So we have refined it. It's a little more chill now. So give it a listen now. I mean, every podcast, there's a bit of a learning curve. It was just sort of figure out what we want to do on it and what we don't want to do. And even though I've been podcasting for a hot minute now, there was still that kind of learning curve with Night Clerk Radio. But we're going to have a guest soon. We already had Caleb as a guest. We're going to do another episode with a guest, and we have some other stuff to announce soon, like a Patreon for Night Clerk Radio with unique rewards just for that. So if you want to find more weird music to listen to, if you want to hear us talk about music theory and whatnot, Night Clerk Radio, it's every other week with each episode's under an hour. It's not that much of a listen. But if you haven't listened, there's already a good backlog for you to catch up on, to binge on. But so that's it for news. Let's get into the episode itself. Blades in the Dark, the hottest game of 2017. We're finally covering an RPPR. So it is a derivative of Powered by the Apocalypse. Yeah, 2017 is the copyright date. It is derived from Powered by the Apocalypse, but it is its own sort of system. Now we've done a variant of this system, Scum and Villainy, that's already up on our play, but I kind of want to go to every guest and kind of talk just kind of what when I say Blades in the Dark, what do you think of? So Jeff, when you first played it, when you first ran it, what when I say Blades in the Dark, what do you think of?
Well, I'm a setting guy in general, so setting really appealed to me. I was a fan of the Dishonored video game.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever played that,
Mm-hmm.
and it sort of struck that same aesthetic for me. And then it was sort of my first introduction to anything related to Apocalypse World. I hadn't actually played any of the previous iterations of that. And so a lot of what it did was new at the moment, which, novel mechanics always are fun, at least initially. So those two things really appealed to me.
Yeah. Blades in the Dark does take a lot of its sort of thematic inspiration from two video game series, Dishonored, and also Thief, which is also sort of industrial, but like stealth, criminal focused. I just watched a video of a guy re-exploring the Thief series. I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely an inspiration for Blades in the Dark. Something about like combining Victorian steampunkery with like some D&D-esque magic and occult weirdness really makes an interesting setting. But so Bill, it's been a bit since you've been on a main RPPR episode. When I say Blades in the Dark, what do you think of?
So probably the first thing that comes to mind is I'm a little sad Caleb isn't here so we can like troll back and forth about this in person. But I first read Blades back in 2017, and I was really glad that by the time it was coming out, the Red Markets Kickstarter was already finished because like the resource management curve like was really similar to me. And like, so there was that. I too had played Dishonored and saw that DNA. The other thing that really got me was the like it was actually a system that wouldn't require miles and miles of kit bashing to play something that looked like the Gentleman Bastards novel series.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've heard good things about that, but yeah, something about taking fantasy and making it really focused on shades of gray, selfishness, and criminality. There's a lot of overlap there, for sure.
For sure. Well, like the other thing was really the stress game, like the little micro game of that resource management. Just like, everyone who's heard me play would know that like that is my kind of jam.
Yeah, stress is really the core of Blades in the Dark more so than like there are injuries, you can be wounded, but wounds are a major thing. Even minor wounds are not insignificant, but like a stress is a lot like rations in Red Market in some way in willpower, because it powers so many abilities and so many things require stress. And you can't lower stress really until the end of a heist. And the resource management of stress, that seems to be, if you had to describe one system as the heart of Blades in the Dark, it would be the stress management system, as opposed to we'll get into the comparing it to other systems later. But like that's a good point. Aaron, Blades in the Dark. What comes to mind?
Well, honestly, the first thing that came to mind was a lot of the use of the Victorian spiritualism, because I definitely got that Dishonored vibe from what you showed me. But honestly, the fact I didn't realize it had so much to do with like spirits being as a physical entity or that part of the supernatural. And the first thing that came to mind setting-wise is similar to a Hellboy spin-off comic called Sir Edward Grey Witchfinder. And that absolutely deals with dealing with those occult threats within like the down dirty alleyways of London. That's like during the Victorian period. So that's really the first thing that kind of stuck to me. Especially also the fact that the combining of certain things like the ectoplasm into their variants of steampunk engines or whatnot, or as I was reading through the crafting system, the fact that you can essentially create an ectoplasm suit, which is for a disembodied spirit, which is not unlike what happened to Johann Kraus in the Hellboy series. So that immediately went like, oh, I have a goal in mind. I need a ghost robot.
They have hulls, which are literally ghost robots. Robots powered by ghosts specifically as a major set. We haven't really explored that in our campaign, but I think we'll move into that.
I want a toy, obviously.
So yeah, that's a good point. I would Mike McNull's art would definitely be a perfect fit for this. You just some ruined statuary There is literally a ghost district that is just ruins because it's been abandoned because it's beyond the barrier. So reading the system, I suppose we have to talk about like the system itself before we can. Before we get into too much about the setting. So the system, I do like that it's player focused or player facing. Sorry, that players are the ones rolling the dice, which is common with all Powered by the Apocalypse games and also Red Markets, many other systems because puts it cuts down on the amount of dice rolling. Period. And I find once we learned how to do the system, it's not like gaming the system for additional dice so you're guaranteed a success. It's gaming the system so that if you get at least a partial success, you get a really good effect, and that's a subtle distinction, because while you do get additional dice, there's a very hard limit on how much you can cap to get additional dice. It's very hard to cheese the system to where you can be perfectly guaranteed a success. But on the other hand, there's always a chance of success because you can always roll 6 on 1d6. So as opposed to finagling modifiers to be virtually guaranteed a success outside of a crit failure, which is what happens to a lot of other RPGs. And as a GM, I like that, but I imagine as players that might be a little stressful. Would you change the system to allow more stacking of dice to guarantee success, or all? But or do you like this as it is, or is it stressful to play? I don't know. Let me ask my players first. Bill, what do you feel about that basic dice mechanic in Blades, where you can only get so much of a dice pool? Like there's not many things you can do to get additional dice, as we have learned.
Right. So I'll admit that like I hadn't maybe quite as much noticed the positioning for effect.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you've said it out loud, that's certainly a fair point. But like thinking, just the basic curve, I haven't stopped to do the math, but like considering that it's roll a pool, take the top die of the pool, the point at which you run into like diminishing returns from adding another die comes pretty quickly. And two, there's the fact that, we started this game from square one, basically. And like, I don't think many of us at all have moved into places where like we're carrying around 2 dots, in a skill to let us base roll, 2 dice. We're having to buy everything along the way, which is super cool. But I think there's definitely going to be there's a reward for playing the resource management game well, in that you get to keep playing the same character, which means over time, if you, lean into your role playing and get your XP boxes and, spend them off well, you're eventually going to come to a place where, you are routinely, picking up 2 or 3 dice as a baseline without any stress spend. So I think the growth in character is going to, definitely show, which is going to line up a lot with the source material, right? I mean, Dishonored and Thief, those are both, immersive sim games where that like personal growth is a big part of it. The sort of things we didn't cite at the top, but things that I know that are a part of it, TV series like I think Peaky Blinders was supposed to be a big influence, which literally is about like a gang growing, So I think that growth curve session to session is an important part of the game.
Yeah. Aaron, any thoughts on that? I know like in our first sessions of our own RPPR campaign, we kind of got that wrong where we were adding dice because of items, but that's not how it's supposed to go. The items only increase what happens if you succeed or at least get a partial success. And yeah, just for listeners at home, if you haven't read the system, if you roll a pool of dice, and if you look at the highest die, and that's the only thing that matters. And if it's a 3 or less, it's a failure. If it's a 4 or 5, it's a partial success. And if it's a 6, it's an outright success. And you get 2 or more 6s, then you get a critical success usually. Like there's some times where you can't get a critical. But that's it. Like, but there's very few things that can give you more dice than your baseline action rating. And they all cost. But Aaron, yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Like, because you're never rolling. It's hard to get more than two extra dice, really. One for
really
pushing
is.
yourself and one for your buddy helping you.
Yeah, or unless you're trying for something else from the effect. And I honestly, actually, even though it is stressful to have to be able to play like that, I think that actually is part of one of the game's strength because it makes every action that you're attempting way more meaningful. And like you said, with the abilities to increase the quality of it, say that you get the 5, yeah, it comes off success. It gives you all a bunch of other benefits or aspects, but then you're running away from your opposition. You know, it's like you're getting chased by the cops, an engine blows up in your face or something like that. So you have to be really mindful of it. And I think as a player, that actually adds more weight and stakes to it too, whether you feel like you're actually part. That's like the story is still kind of keeping up. And as a GM, although I haven't obviously run this, I think that gives you a lot more opportunities to add challenges or elements of the games. That's not just an abject, you pass without any complications or you fail so hard and you're stuck and you can't do anything else. So I think that it's really a nice benefit on both sides.
Jeff, as a published game designer, what are your thoughts on this base mechanic? This is the basic conflict resolution thing.
Actually, I have to say I like it, and for several reasons. And I'll give you an anecdote as to why maybe there's a little more, I don't want to say credibility. So we were playing Beam Sabers the other night. It's another Forged in the Dark game. It's basically anime mecha robot teenager thing. And during the session, I rolled a total of 9 dice, and 6 of them were 1s. So that's not only is that typical of my dice luck, but I still had a good time. And I think that's the heart of it. This Powered by the Apocalypse games in general, and certainly Forged in the Dark games, they are embracing the idea of failing forward and complicated successes. I think in much more than certainly traditional incremental games, but even other games where you might feel you have more control over the percentage score that you're rolling against, but ultimately you either succeed or fail in those games as well, right? But without the sort of complicating elements that make the story more interesting and still push it forward. So I think even though there is a pretty small range of ways that you can affect the outcome of the dice, there mechanically the idea that it's failing you forward and complicating the story, I think is a positive. And also I think it makes the resource management that Bill's talking about more significant, right? Because if you're managing stress and you're pushing yourself to get an extra die, it's meaningful. It's meaningful both to the die pool, but also to the resource that you're expending. So it feels more significant.
Yeah. Now, one thing that actually this reminds me of in some ways is the Gumshoe sort of point spin system, because it's, again, resource management, but also because I think with the right players, this is really good. But I think one potential downside of this system is that there are going to be some players who really get too stressed out about this in real life, like that the fact that they can never guarantee a success, like that they can never spend a point of willpower or whatever, or stack so many modifiers that they cannot fail at something. And for some players, that anxiety at always possibly failing, no matter how many dice they roll, because they can never get that many dice, means that they won't have as much fun playing the system. And of course, I think those players are probably not gonna like this game is going for a very particular sort of theme, and it's about at what price power and wealth, like how dark are you willing to go to gain personal fortune, the whole thing of emulating more like movies like Scarface than in some ways than Lord of the Rings kind of I shall do the good thing and gain power doing it. So I think that's a potential downside for it. For certain groups, I think they're not going to like this. But I think you have to be sort of careful if you're picking Blades in the Dark to run, to be aware that this is going to create some anxiety in players. And now whether they can manage it or not is sort of who knows. But it does help a lot. Now, I am curious, are there any mechanics that any of you don't particularly care for? I mean, after this we'll pick at the sort of mechanics we really do like, but like, are there any
I'll admit to something. I don't know if it's that I dislike it. I'll just say that I haven't quite internalized it yet. Even after running a fairly lengthy campaign, the idea of how risky and controlled and desperate interfaces with the potential qualities of the outcomes. I always felt like I would kind of get stuck on that, trying to make it feel different to the players, and I was never satisfied in how I made those different options feel different in their outcomes.
Okay, yeah. Honestly, I tend to revert to like risky is the default thing. It's a typical RPG action. Like if you're going to do it, it's going to suck if you fail, but it's not game over, but you will lose something. You will take a hit in some way. Controlled is like, well, if you fail, it just becomes a risky action if you try again. Otherwise, nothing. Like it's just, it's not, it's simple, but it's still difficult enough that you have to roll, and then desperate is like, are you sure you want to do that? Like is okay. I mean, all right, go for it.
I understood the intention, but I could never, it never felt like I was able to express it in the fiction in a way that made one role option different from another role option.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It's very subjective. Like they don't really give you very concrete, like this is, they give you examples, but like it's very subjective. And that sort of, you want to be fair to the players though. And so that is going to be, am I being fair? Like that is kind of a source of anxiety for GMs. You don't want to be like, a jerk GM or like making it too easy or too hard. I see where you're coming with that. That's very. Bill, is there any sort of mechanics you're not either haven't internalized or you're not particularly a fan of?
I mean, I would concur with that. Like, I think, excuse me, that sort of like 3x3, matrix of position and effect, like seems conceptually really great and seems like a level of evolution, right? Like when I read that reads to me as, okay, somebody has accepted that the fundamental like challenge of failing forward is that like, now you're on the hook, right? That's the actual improv of GMing, is to, in the moment, hold in your head, like not just the binary of a pass fail, but like, that's where it actually gets into the screenwriting of, looking at the video game influences, it's pretty easy. If you try something, in Dishonored and fail, like you still have the option, right? Things are going to get worse. You might have been trying for the stealth run and now you're going to have to kill guards. And like you as a player now are engaging the option of, do I reload because I wanted to keep my pacifist run or what have you? But that's not really in the fiction. But like, if you look at the fictional versions, that the fiction that is trying to be emulated, like those fail forwards, obviously, very, very infrequently do, the thieves in, oh gosh, what was the first book? Anyway, in the Gentleman Bastard series, if they fail outright, it was for a planned story reason by the author. Likewise, if something absolutely goes pear-shaped in Peaky Blinders, like that was for a good reason. Those sort of like, you get what you want, but it hurts things are things that those authors or those screenwriters like have a chance to write out beforehand. And like, I think position and effect are a step forward in like understanding how to adjudicate
Mhm.
fail forward, but I think it's just, it's still sort of underdeveloped, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
great at a conceptual level. I think there's just like one more level of really like grinding it into the practical that I'm
Mhm.
missing.
Yeah, I would agree, especially position and effect are very murky for me. So like so I'm not quite where Jeff is, but like position and effect are like making it especially with the partial successes, like, well, I guess you get reduced effect, but I can't, it's like you're trying to get through a door. Well, what's reduced effect for getting through a door? Like you're trying to pick the lock and okay, well, that's kind of a binary thing. So yeah, sometimes it's hard to adjudicate that on the fly, especially if you can't always come up with now they have a lot of tools for like adjudicating that by like, oh, you get stress or you get heat, or you could take an injury on the context, or you have to spend coin, or it happens to someone else. So they have multiple levers that you can use for position and effect, but it can be hard to figure it out because you have to all kind of improvise it on the fly. There's no like, okay, if you fail this type of roll, you take this kind of penalty exactly, or something like that. So
Right. And
yeah.
I feel like, so I was actually listening to Ken and Robin last week, and they were talking about like Gumshoe and how it is, still more of a trad style game in that, as a player, you're fairly limited in Gumshoe in the ways in which you can affect the fiction, right? You're still predominantly driving a single character. And I think the interesting thing about Blades is that it occupies such a middle ground between the trad and story game space, in that, like, I think the things we're all struggling with here is that we come from, more trad kind of backgrounds, and that it's a little weird to us to not roll dice for more, ultimately mundane or stakeless things.
Yeah.
And that, we're having to adjust to think about, okay, so it's not necessarily all on Ross as the GM to come up with, the way in which my character fails forward, or, the devil's bargain, that I am saying I am willing to take, that like all of us sitting around the table can contribute to the fiction in that way. That's just a change in stance that I think we're all adapting to.
Yeah. There's different expectations for it. And so like, I think it's sort of readjusting. Yeah. That mindset is definitely an issue. Even after running Scum and Villainy for like 6 or 8 sessions, I'm still having to adjust it. Cause Blades is subtly different than Scum and Villainy. Aaron, are there any mechanics that you're either not 100% clear on or you just don't care for?
The only thing I know I've struggled with a little bit, and I've had to read it over it a couple times, is primarily with the crafting side, since I decided to play a leech in there, since, tech, big surprise there, I know. But looking through it, it wasn't so much just I didn't understand how things may have worked into there, but getting into the lore setting and how they want to combine things. And I read through the crafting examples that they gave a couple times before, and to me, if you're wanting to invent something, I'm not, and since we haven't really done this outside of some minor things, it seems like an original idea is going to be like potentially a several sessions thing, because looking on it, they talked about like the flamethrower being the primary one. They said that's going to be like an 8-segment long just to plan out the project, which that seems a bit excessive in the system, depending on like how much downtime you get with that as well. But I'm slowly learning it a little bit more. It's just at first it seemed to be.
Well, I think the thing is though, I'm looking at it literally right now. To design it is 8 segments, but once you craft it, it's just one tinker roll. So it's one downtime activity to craft it once, or to one item of it. So one thing of it. So like one bandolier of whatever bomb or drug, or like one gadget. So like that's the thing, is like once you design it, then you can just crank them out. One per downtime activity. So
which I can see that.
That is a bit. Yeah, it is. On long-term projects and acquire asset do seem to be underpowered downtime activities compared to the mainstays. But yeah, that's fair. That is a bit advanced, especially for your character since you're a leech.
Yeah.
The tinkerer type. So, yeah, that's fair. It doesn't seem, it's more of a role-playing thing than like a power gaming thing because it requires so much time and resources in order to craft something new. It's more like, I want to be the guy with the flamethrower. That's how I visualize my character. That's their personality. They're the guy with the flamethrower.
Yeah, and it made it also just a little part of the lore of the system too, because that's where I kind of hit a little bit of a brick wall when we first started. Is that I was trying to look through the stuff that you were given as characters. It's like, all right, how can I combine these elements? And then it said like, well, you kind of need to have the alchemist side for this, or you need to have the artificer or the arcane portion of that, which are all available. But like when we started the campaign, you're just usually restricted to one of those abilities in the playbook. I'm like, eh. So that's where you kind of it's turned into like the bomb throwing Bolshevik just at the first, like, well, here you go. Hope it helps.
Yeah, that's fair. So for me, the mechanic, I'm kind of aside from what you mentioned, that is sort of been a problem for me is the engagement role. So when you start a score, which is what you call missions or heists, a job, a thing, a quest your group has to do or chooses to do. Before you do anything, you have to. There's this thing about like figuring out what the initial role's difficulty is going to be, and this is called the engagement role. And so basically, you look at how many advantages you have and how many disadvantages you have, and then this is one of the few times the GM rolls because it's essentially the GM rolls a pool of d6s, and then based on that determines whether it's a controlled roll, a risky roll, or a desperate roll. And for me, it seems a little unnecessary. Like and also you have to choose like what type of plan. And I appreciate this, like trying to get the players to focus. Okay, what type of plan is this? But like, is this a all-out assault? Is this stealth? Is this a con job? Are you using magic? But I feel myself sort of skipping over. The more I run this, the more I'm trying to skip over or just kind of skim the engagement role, because the players usually have a really good idea of what they want to do, and when they start the plan, I have a usually good idea of how desperate or how risky this action is going to be. Like, is this, like we're going to con them in the first thing is to get like disguises for everybody. So we're going to go break into the barracks to steal the blue coat uniforms. And like, well, that seems like that's pretty risky. So like, but the players they're waiting till night or whatever. So that's not desperate. They're taking some time to do it. So, I feel, go on.
I actually think there was something revelatory in what you just said there. That like you as a GM, and I'm not saying this is, wrong or a bad thing to do, but like you are sort of judging the quality of the plan there. And my read of the engagement role is that like in being a heist game that dispatches with planning, like Blades doesn't actually want to answer as a matter of the GM having to make that decision whether the plan was a good idea or not. The engagement role basically reduces to math. Did you actually come up with a good plan? Okay.
All right.
I would kind of echo that. And I think I experienced it more as a kind of a literal opening moment in the story. In fact, to kind of do a callback to the through line of heists in role-playing games, I think that's one of the strengths is that Blades does a lot of things to honor the heist story and without having to have a bunch of people who really dig or are good at planning sitting around the table. And I think the engagement role is one of them. Like, our story has begun and you are doing this thing and you're in a good position. And I don't mean within the rules of the game, but like the things that are happening around you, the fiction is going well, going so-so, or you just knocked over the vase and it's shattered on the floor. And I think that's one of the many tools that the game provides, and sometimes subtly, to support heist fiction.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying I'm getting rid of it. It's just it seems kind of clunky by the time we get into it. At least as I've been running it lately. because it seems like the players want to skip past it, and I have to like, whoa, okay, let's do our engagement roll. Hold on, let me figure out what all your modifiers are for this dice roll. So in some way, yeah, I feel so that maybe is my annoyance to it, is that, and part of that I think is going back to what Bill's saying. We're just sort of making the typical, trad RPG thing of rolling for everything. So the players are already like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and roll to detect traps. Like, well, that's not how this works. You just roll to see if you do the whole sneaking in and breaking, for your whole burglary, which it's just one roll. And let me set the risks. Let me tell you what will happen if you succeed or fail before you roll. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would actually lay that at the feet, of us as your players, sort of like, I know I read Blades through back in 2017, and I think the engagement role is a relatively important part, but it's also, just a couple of pages out of a pretty chunky boy of a book.
Yeah.
So like, it's pretty easy to forget, but I think, even in the midst of this discussion, like regrounding it in what is the fictional point of this? Well, it's to, I mean, from a greedy perspective, it's to reinforce to the players that we don't have to do that planning, because like that planning ceases to be, essentially a standard, engagement like this in another game would be, us, the group of players essentially trying to, appeal to the GM to say, what is the threshold of enough, quality planning to not put ourselves in a bad situation. And really it's just taking that burden off of both parties.
Yeah.
So one of the tools in my running heist game toolbox for RPGs is the idea of in media res openings or in media res moments. And I think the engagement role is essentially that. It provides sort of an in media res start for the players that bypasses all the dithering that usually goes into getting some sort of plan in place and on its way. And I just really appreciate that because I think it's a useful structuring mechanic.
Okay. Yeah. You give me, yeah. I mean, I'm certainly not going to drop the engagement roles. So hopefully we'll get used to letting me like not trying to rush past me setting up the engagement first. And me forgetting to, if we do heists, for next session.
I mean,
but yeah,
I'll be the designated pedant and like keep calling you back to it.
Yeah, no
Just
worries.
need an engagement light.
Yeah.
This is a complicated way of us telling you're wrong, Ross. That's all.
It's really not.
It's discussion. It's discussion. So we should probably actually move to the mechanics that we actually do. I mean, I do quite enjoy quite a few mechanics, and your talk about running heist is one of the. I'll just start with one of the mechanics I really enjoy, which is the flashback mechanic, which now I've heard horror stories of GMs who misuse this by imposing stress costs on all flashbacks, but flashbacks are like 0 to 2 stress depending on how complicated they are. And I've been certainly leaning as a GM mostly is like it's 0 or 1 most of the time. And that's allowing players to jump into scenes and also like, oh, I just thought of something cool now. Can I flashback and say I did this? And like, yeah, of course. That's explicitly written in the game. So like of course I had a fake ID set up. Well, of course I would be waiting in ambush to protect my buddy who obviously just flubbed his skirmish roll to take out the guard. So, or his finesse roll to sneak up on or prowl or whatever.
Of course I knew I was going to poison all the wine at the dinner party. So of course I would have brought an antidote.
Exactly. In case one of us accidentally sipped it. So yeah, I really enjoy that flashback mechanic. It really encourages players, especially players who are like, there are times where the player group is split up and like, well, I guess I'm not in the scene, so I'm just gonna look at my phone for the next 20 minutes. Well, no, because the flashback, you could just say you were there. You were there all along. Haha. So that is a mechanic I really like. Aaron, what is the mechanic you really like?
Actually, one thing that kind of I felt like it was a little bit irritated by it the last time, but the more that I thought about it, the clock structure specifically going back towards healing and dealing with some of the stress over time too, because I like the idea that you would have to go ahead and forward and role play maybe some of the injuries or maybe some of the long-term effects of things going forward in the game. And that you can actually, and that you're just generally building up to it, because building up to like rebuilding what you need in that particular session or modifying how you're going to play. Like the last one, I got beaten. Well,
you took some injuries.
Yeah, let's say that.
You took some injuries, and I really do like that too. It's very thematic. Injuries are significant, and it takes some time to heal. And when you're healing, you can't be going out and doing other stuff as much.
So at least it gives a more of a grounded sense of realism in this story about heisting in a Victorian ghost world. So
bruises don't heal overnight. You don't sleep in an inn and recover at full health. So I do like that. Jeff, what's a mechanic you really like in Blades?
Well, I'll start by echoing what you said about flashbacks. I think, as you know, the reason I'm talking with you guys right now, I think, is because after the last heist episode, I'm like, Ron, heists are my favorite thing in role-playing games. Why didn't you? Yeah. So I whined enough that I think you felt bad and invited me to come talk about them. But I think one of the things that is essential to heist RPG play and structure is recognizing a couple of essentials. One of them is this metatrope that exists, I think, in popular heist fiction and movies and things. This audience awareness. There's a structure to the story that you know that you don't know everything that's going on, and you're trying to figure it out. Because it's a movie, they can hide things from the audience and then reveal them at the end. And try as you might, that is nigh impossible to do in a role-playing game.
Yeah, that's true.
The mechanics of sitting around a table. So anything that adds structure to the heist, that gives it some sort of meta control, some kind of fourth wall influence from the players and their experience of it, I think helps reach towards that. It doesn't replace it, but it reaches towards that. And I think that the flashback mechanic is the best way that I've seen in role-playing games to do that. So definitely lean on that in Blades. Really enjoy it, both in terms of just how it affects the narrative, but also how it makes it feel heisty. But if I were to sort of pick a different mechanic, I really appreciate how many little subtle ways the game lets you address another part of heist games, is this idea of failing forward. If we take a classic example of breaking into a bank vault and you fail to crack the vault, then the narrative sort of halts, right? In a role-playing game, that's a lame session. You want to be able to keep going with the story in some way that's fun. And Blades is just full of options to do that. I mean, really, if you look at how the game allows you to fail forward, and this is just some thoughts, I don't know, there might be other ways too, but the engagement roll itself doesn't set up a failure. It just puts you in a situation. I think that's pretty valuable. Obviously, the flashbacks. Pushing as a mechanic, allowing you to get a dice bonus by sacrificing some stress. I think that's really good. Devil's Bargain, same.
Oh, yeah. Devil's bargains are fun, but they take a bit on the GM because it's like, what's a fair devil's bargain?
It's costly, but it does give you a chance to, if not exactly fail forward, to sort of hedge your bet so that you won't fail. The idea of clocks, I think, is essential. I've heard people compare them to skill tests in like D&D, what they call skill challenge. Is that what the D&D is called? Yeah. I mean, that's basically what they are. I think they visualize better as a clock, but they are a great way to allow failure that stops the game and continue the story forward. Do the guards show up? Well, there's another tick on the clock, the clock. So it lets you fail. I think stress as a mitigator is huge. And loadouts, the fact that your loadouts don't have to be preset, that you can be like, oh crap, I wish I had some wire cutters. Oh, hey, I have some wire cutters. I think that little toolbox of things that allow you to fail forward, or at least hedge your bets against failing, are really valuable parts of making this feel like a heist game.
Bill, any other mechanics you want to highlight?
Well, Jeff just stole my go-to with the loadouts because I do agree that like it further contributes to like getting you out of the planning doldrums and actually into doing the fun part of the heist. And even further contributes like you were saying, Jeff. That the need for that like fourth wall breaking thing comes about, I think, because when we're playing a role-playing game, like streaming or recording for a podcast notwithstanding, like the audience is also the performers. So that, there's a lot of little elegant ways that Blades gives you to allow you to surprise yourself, basically. But I think probably the single thing, and everyone's used to hearing me harp on this at this point, but like the difference that in the stress economy, if you boost yourself, it costs twice as much as if someone else boosts you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like is so subtle, but is so important because it essentially tells you this is a game where some party splitting is okay, but you don't actually want to go off and do something by yourself. And
the game is about teamwork. It's about teamwork. You're a crew.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is subtle and shouts so loud at the same time. I just love it.
Mm-hmm. No,
am I hearing that your crew is not?
No, they've been pretty good about that.
We play role-playing games, Jeff, so occasionally people go off by themselves.
Yeah, they do. But you guys have been pretty good about. Can anyone help me out with this? Oh, okay. There's been a lot of share the load or share the stress in the game so far, but we'll see if that keeps going forward. Yeah. And by the way, Jeff, this is not when you mentioned that you wanted to talk about heist, I was like, oh, thank God, another person, because there's just so many podcasts to do in a year. It's oh God, yes, just content. Yes, give it to me. Yes. Yeah. Oh, precious.
Glad I could be there for you.
Content for the content god. Cast
apparently,
for the cast bro.
I feel basically. Make a little aside if you don't mind. I want to acknowledge Ben Hesketh. You know him. I think you've met him times. He's a big fan of the show. He and I have spent a lot of time talking about heist role-playing games, and he actually did a really fun conversion of the Red Markets mechanics.
Oh, yeah. Caleb ran a playtest for us.
Yeah, and I didn't want to make it sound like I had all these great ideas about this fourth wall mechanic and intentionally tricking the audience, because really it was he that opened my eyes to that in role-playing games as a connection to the traditional heist fiction. But I know he's likely to listen to this, and I just wanted to make sure to give him a shout out.
Yeah. All right. I think we have the playtest actually on our latest B-sides. I'm not going to check right now, but yeah, it was a fun game.
You did some very clever things with it that I really appreciated. It was fun.
Yeah. Caleb's sort of in the depths of writing for God's Teeth right now, but after that, who knows if he'll help Ben with that. I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea and obviously in the last couple of months, everybody's schedule has been kind of screwed up. So, but yeah, of course, we were talking about the system. We talk a little about the setting though, at least. So Duskwall is very interesting as a setting because I have to remind myself, one, there's no daytime. Like it's always dark and it's only varying levels of darkness. So which is obviously Dishonored as an inspiration still has daytime in it. So it's kind of a post-apocalyptic setting.
Blades in the day-night cycle doesn't really have the same ring.
Yeah, that's true. There's also the fact that it's very focused on the city of Duskwall to the point that they only describe the city, and they kind of describe what else is in the world, but there's no world map, and there's very little aside from like, there's the city of Lockport, and there's these other countries out there. So there be, but for example, in the RPPR campaign, the players are smugglers and they have a boat. So there is be this, well, I guess we could run eventually. Maybe the players have to smuggle something to Lockport, which is certainly within shipping range because ships go there and back. but because so that's something I've been sort of like, I both really like and appreciate the narrow but really deep focus on one city. But on the other hand, there's like, well, what if I want to go outside of Duskwall? I don't want to, and that requires me to just basically make up everything, which I kind of want to give the players at least like, I want to make it fair for the players. Like you have the same access to the same setting information as everyone else. So you can, you're not, it's not just, aha, I've made up an enchanted realm. Come and, it's all made up and you don't know any of the rules of this place. So yeah, I know that part of this philosophy is that there's not really much in the way of like supplement, expanse and splat books and that kind of thing. But I don't know. I kind of would like at some point an Atlas or a world, the world of Duskwall kind of supplement at some point. But yeah, I guess, I mean, that's a good thing. It left me wanting more. Any other sort of, I guess, insights about the setting? Aaron, you're new to the setting aside from the campaign. You haven't really.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What really struck you about the campaign setting?
Mainly when I kind of read through the bit of it, and you're talking about Dustfall itself too,
just Blades in the Dark, the setting, all the setting stuff that's in there, not just the city, but like setting elements. You could talk about the supernatural, the technology, the culture, whatever.
Yeah, it really was the supernatural element that kind of, like I said before, that just ended up striking me as the most interesting as well. And as in the odd way that they kind of put this, I'm trying to find a better way than saying steampunk, obviously, like ectopunk, I guess, if you could put that, is that they put such an emphasis on like bending these horrible ghosts that exist in this reality to your own whim and to your own ability to use that as well. And also the decaying, that's the decaying ruin aspect of the city, even at the highest standards too, which especially if you're trying to do any of these like dark, that's like dark and dirty, lack of a better term, lock, stock, and two smoking barrels, but in the Victorian period, robberies, that's like heist stories too. It gives me a very good feeling about that too. Of like, that's like, how do you basically try to survive while everything around you is essentially the fall of the House of Usher?
Okay. Yeah, fair. Yeah, it is a refreshing thing from the, generic D&D, ye old Game of Thrones medieval Witcher fantasy that's very original. Copyright, do not steal my characters. So yeah, I mean, that's a refreshing change of pace. Bill, what strikes you? What any either good or bad? What really struck you about the setting?
I think it's challenging for me to not just sort of like let my mind glide to, the other Duskwall. I wasn't that, didn't they accidentally have the same name in common from Dishonored? Or at least it was very similar.
No, Dunwall. Dunwall is the name. And I just played Dishonored too. So
different. Yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah, just starting with DU. I mean, it's fine. Yeah, two syllables. Yeah.
Yeah. But like to me, it lands largely in that sort of space. Like plus again, like having read the Locke Lamora stuff, like especially the Liza Locke Lamora, the first book, taking place in a very Venice inspired city, like. Given that Duskwall, also is very maritime sort of in its stance. And then like the other thing, like I'm almost saying nothing here, and I realize I'm sort of yammering on about it, and I apologize for that, but like I just sort of like see the confluence of influences. The other one being it sort of has, in a non-comedic way, a certain Ankh-Morpork kind of vibe to it, to where it's just all of those things sort of colliding in a very like lovely sort of, I think if I was to say anything, what I recall from like reading through the book, especially, was that it was really nice how there was such like fine-grained detail. It didn't really, even though there obviously is a thousands of years ago, it doesn't really deal with that at all. It's just, here are the gangs that you may interact with. Here are the various things they do, right? It is very, I know this is a loaded term around here, but street level.
Okay. Yeah. Um, certainly an important consideration. Yeah. Jeff, any thoughts on the setting?
Yeah, I mean, I like it in broad strokes very much. And like I said on the outset, because I really like Dishonored. But what I appreciate it most about the setting as it's presented, is I think it's a perfect example of the ideal combination of information,
Mhm.
but spare information and being
Mhm.
evocative. As a setting guy, I mean, in my own world building in the games I've worked on, I, I I'm really into like detail and including everything and not missing any little part that someone might want to know about. And that has a place. But one thing I absolutely can't do, and so admire when people can, is provide enough information that it starts ideas percolating and gives you inspiration without just filling page after page.
Mhm.
It's a really potent kind of writing that I think is hit perfectly in this book, and one that just makes it enjoyable to read, but also a great way to generate ideas for the game.
Mhm.
So I really appreciate that about how the setting's presented.
Yeah, the broad strokes thing does like leave a lot for the GM to fill in. I mean, everything is broad strokes. And one thing I do like is on the first page of the GM sort of reference sheet is a list of common names for the setting, both first names and family names and nicknames, and also important NPCs in the city. And they're just like Raffaello, painter, interested in the occult. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can use that guy. And which he became an NPC in the latest game. And yeah, so that's just as an organizational thing, not even really a setting specific thing. But yeah, it's not, there are some RPGs that describe the setting so meticulously, there's no room for the PCs to do, because everything's, if you PCs do anything, they'll just, it's like hitting a bunch of dominoes, and it's like, okay,
Right.
well, yeah.
And on the other end, with a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse stuff, it's so spare that it's almost setting independent in many ways.
Yeah, a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games are like toolkit.
And so I feel like this just sort of hits that right note for plenty of material to play with, but you don't need to have memorized a gazetteer to run it.
Yeah. So, if you haven't played or read Blades in the Dark yet, and this sounds interesting to you, should probably give it a shot. This fall we'll have a campaign. I'm not sure how many sessions we'll get in. It all depends on people's work schedules, which are kind of up in the air a little bit. But we've already got at least 4 episodes recorded. So, that'll be fun. It's been quite fun for us to play through. But yeah, when we with whatever, maybe not, it doesn't have to be vaporwave. It could be something else.
Probably gonna be
That's
vaporwave
awfully
though, right?
defensive, Ross.
So we have some shout outs. I'll just go first with a book I'm reading right now. We're rereading it. I've read the entire story before, but it's a graphic novel from Casey Green. It is called He is a Good Boy. It is a really good sort of odyssey of a little boy. His name he's an acorn named Crange, and he has his parent tree gets cut down, and he has to find his way in the world. And it's a Casey Green comic. It gets weird. It goes places, but
It's about weird.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, it starts with an acorn, a talking acorn, and he lives in bug world that coexists along with the normal sized people.
That's
yeah. So it starts weird. All right, and it gets weirder. There's homages to Bugs Bunny. There's just some great art in it, and also a really interesting storyteller about sort of like, what is the purpose of life? What is, the aimlessness of, and alienation of modern society? And just a lot of weirdness and a bit of cosmic horror, especially towards the end. So He is a Good Boy, I believe, is online, but there is a big full color book of it available. I highly recommend that. It was on Kickstarter, came out a while ago, but I just finally got around to rereading it, and I remembered how much I enjoyed it. And it's just got really good art. I love Casey's style. So yeah, if you like weird odysseys about bugs and talking acorns, and yeah, it's
I feel
worth
like
reading.
I
Yeah.
read like 2/3 of this back in the day, and it puts me in mind of the only thing that is worth retaining from the movie The Spirit, which is Samuel L. Jackson saying, "That is just plain damn weird."
Yeah. Yeah, it's very weird. Yeah, so Jeff, what's your first shout out?
Playing in a campaign right now of UVG, the Ultraviolet Grasslands. It was a recent Kickstarter. It was one of those games. I don't know if you guys have this, but you see a game and you really are excited about it, but you don't want to. You want to play it.
Yeah.
It was one of those, and I kind of poked a friend of mine who's in our gaming group and wanted to run something, but never really has, and so he took a big bite because it's not the easiest sort of to run, I don't think. But it's just a beautiful, evocative book. The aesthetic is amazing. To me, I think artwork is brilliant. And it's got this funky, weird writing style. Very much trying to evoke sort of like 70s, 80s album cover art.
Yeah.
As if it were the backdrop for a role-playing game. For me, the best pitch for it is if you're familiar with the Heavy Metal movie from something.
The animated one, yeah.
The last segment, one I think it's called Tarna, about the woman with the sword on the flying pterodactyl fighting the mutants. Yeah. And the wasteland that they travel through and the sort of threats they face. That's what it kind of feels like, is that turned into a role-playing game. And it's just having a good time with it. And it's just has a fresh take that is just nice to experience.
Cool. Yeah. No, I have seen references to it on in various discussions online, and I'm very curious about it. And yeah, there's a lot of RPGs I definitely I want to play so bad. And not as a GM, but as a player. And certainly there's a lot of, like, Lancer would be one. But I also want to run that too. So, but yeah, I totally know what you mean. So.
Yeah, it has a nice structural mechanic to it too. Not the same as Red Markets. But, Red Markets has the vignettes and the negotiation and the legs and the job. This has a different kind of meta structure, but it does have a very long map. Literally, it's like 10 feet long if you connected all the pages. And you're traveling from point to point on the map, and then there's structures in the game to give you encounters and experiences and extra mechanical benefits as you travel to these places. And one of the players is supposed to actually track all the progress of your caravan, and the map is not only a thing that should be at the table that you can write on, but it should also be in the game, and the game master is supposed to keep track of where it is, so that if damage happens to, like if that backpack gets stolen or if the wagon burns down, they are instructed to sort of like modify the map or damage the map accordingly, so that you lose information or have blank spots in your future. Stuff like that just makes it neat little touches.
Yeah, that would be pretty easy to modify for online games, is the GM just is the one controlling the image of the map, and then just says, all right, players, don't screenshot this, here it is.
Yeah, we've been playing online, so it's pretty convenient.
Yeah. Okay, well, this section got burned. Let me take the burn tool at Photoshop, and all right. There you go. Yeah, that's I like that. I really like that idea. Bill, do you have a shout out?
Sure. First one is actually going to be to a fantasy or maybe sci-fi, I don't know, book that actually the founder of my company recommended to me. It is a Roger, sorry, wrong R name, Zelazny book that is not Chronicles of Amber. It is The Lord of Light, or I think just Lord of Light, which... Gosh, it's almost hard to discuss without being slightly spoilery, not really in a plot way, but just suffice it to say, it is several generations on from a colony ship from Earth landing, and the colonists who actually disembarked that ship deciding to set themselves up as a replication of the Hindu pantheon. And what happens when one of the people involved decides that maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And actually, the story is largely a flashback about the last time he decided this was a bad idea. But like, you know, Roger Zelazny, I think, is one of those people that maybe, I don't know, maybe everybody else has read him and I'm late to the game. But like, being a pretty big Gaiman fan and knowing that there's sort of an agony of influence there, let's just say that in the first chapter, the protagonist delivers what might be best termed as a somewhat Buddhist homily, where he capital letters drops the terms dream and endless, and it's just sort of like, I see what's going on here.
Nice. Obviously. That would be an influence on Gaiman. He's one of the big names in sci-fi of the I think it was the 70s, 80s, that sort of later.
Even earlier, I like digging into the history a little bit. I had been meaning to dig into some new wave authors, but it turns out like he actually is maybe the guy that immediately predates the new wave. So.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, he's a big name in genre fiction. He's also a big gap in my own reading thing. I've read very little of him. So I need to need to fix. Yeah. Well, sounds like a good starting place for me. Yeah.
It's a good one. And it is, I want to say, under 300 pages.
Okay. Yeah.
And like only like that Buddhist homily is maybe a bit of a slog, but apart from that, it reads real breezy.
Cool. Neat. Aaron, what's your first shout out?
So the main channel I have today is actually a channel I've been watching for a while called Odin Makes. It's a crafting channel for cosplay props and different costumes by a guy named Odin Abbott, actual name. I first caught wind of him about a couple of years ago when he was doing things for another series called DIY Prop Shop, which primarily focused on being able to do different decent looking props on a budget, basically, without having to spend down. And where he focuses mostly is making really neat prop replicas out of primarily craft foams. He's kind of upgraded doing the cosplay HD foams, which is not too expensive, but he does a lot of really impressive things. Like one of the things, he does a bunch of Marvel props, but one of the things I remember he did recently was over this last year while he's been in quarantine with at least one of his friends, is a full RX-78 Gundam suit, which is, again, primarily almost craft. I originally came to him because I was looking for ways to create a nice right hand of Doom, and he actually puts out plans. He does everything to show you how it works and gives a lot of advice. And the nice thing he does is that he particularly makes things in a way and gives instructions for people who might not have power tools, and says like, hey, here's where you can get this. All this stuff is easily picked up locally if you can get to that, or it can be delivered on the cheap. So, and like the current thing that he's done that's been really nifty is that he's been crafting various different foam-based masks that you can inline with t-shirt materials if you want to wear a mask out in public that doesn't look just like a regular mask. So I know he did. Actually, you said you were watching My Hero. Oh no, you weren't watching My Hero Academia. That was something different. So, but but he made a bunch of different things. So, but yeah, it's a really cool channel. So I'd recommend watching it if you want some tips or plans.
We'll have a link in the show notes. So yeah, my next shout out is The Other Side of the Mountain by Michal Bernanos. It is a short novel or a novella. It is a very weird story of a young guy who is shanghaied onto a ship, and this ship is going to the New World to take part in the Spanish conquest. And it doesn't go well for him. The way he befriends the ship's cook and becomes the ship's sort of like the assistant cook, but so the first half of the novel is the ship becomes becalmed, bad things happen, but then they get ashore, and then the things get really weird. If you already have the weird anthology, which we had mentioned before on the show, it's a great thing. But you also get this as a standalone novella, but it's just, boy, it's a weird ass story. And I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, but like it gets into this sort of cosmic horror in some ways, and it's just stories don't have to make sense. Like it's just like things that happen, and like, why did it happen? What is the cause of this? Yeah. It's just I really get a bit of weird fiction that I enjoyed. So worth reading if you're into that. But Jeff, you had another shout out.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about another game. It's called The Edge Dawnfall, and it's by Awaken Realms. They are probably best known for a game called Nemesis, which is sort of the Aliens, the board game that was hot off Kickstarter last year. Mm-hmm. And another game, Tainted Grail. It's another big box. I don't want to call it a minis game because it's more than that. I really like it for a couple of reasons. One, it's got lots of really cool miniatures set in this sort of like science fantasy, crazy, over-the-top game universe. But the game itself is constructed around miniatures combat, but on board with elements of deck construction and area control. And what I like about it tactically is that it doesn't require that you look many turns ahead. I'm terrible at those. Right, I'm the world's worst chess player because of that. And because it's powered from these hands of cards, it lets you kind of focus on what you can do now in this turn and maybe the next turn, but you don't have to sweat what comes after that too much. I mean, better players could, I'm sure. But the second thing I've really enjoyed about it is that my wife's never really a board game player, but during quarantine, it arrived right before quarantine hit. So I had something to paint while I was sitting in the house. But she was curious about it, so we played it, and now she is hooked on board games, and it's become part of our routine. And she keeps wanting to go back and play that particular game.
Cool.
And seems to really enjoy it. So I really enjoyed it. I just want to spread the word because it would be great if other people found it and got into playing it too.
Nice. Yeah, no, I really like that. It's definitely a game I'm interested in, but yeah, where I'm still thinking, of course, our abandoned Gloomhaven campaign because of reasons. Right. So someday. One
of the neat advantages of this is it comes with, you can buy it at different levels, but it comes with, if you go all in, it comes with 6 or 7 different factions. So you don't have, it's not that like you have to buy your own army and then he has to buy his own army and she has to get her own army and you have to get together. It's all part of the same game.
Okay.
It plays very quickly. And in fact, once you know what you're doing, you can play standard games in an hour, but it also comes with a bunch of campaign books. So that set different factions against each other. So there's just lots of different ways to play it. And it's really,
cool.
It's really enjoyable.
Yeah. I like that. Let's see. Bill, you had another shout out.
Yeah. So I am sure that many listeners of the podcast are familiar with the YouTube stylings of one Harrison Bomber guy. But I wanted to make sure if you're, not subscribed or whatever, you go out there and check out his latest 2.5-hour long video talking about why the Rooster Teeth produced quasi-anime Ruby is somewhat disappointing. It definitely saved me the effort of actually watching Ruby, which is something I had been somewhat curious about, but had a much better time, mainlining that hot H Bomber guy style.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I've become. I'm beginning to appreciate long form YouTube critiques of culture. I watched Your Movie Sucks do a 2.5-hour critique of, making the case that Kimba the White Lion is not the same as the Lion King, that Disney did not rip off the Japanese anime and manga. It makes a very convincing case, though. And I was like, oh my God, I watched 2.5 hours. So I will, and you're not the first person to recommend that to me. Maddie recommended me the RWBY critique as well. So I think I will be watching it. But yeah, yeah. Sorry.
For talking about, no worries, sorry, I interrupted. If there was a talking about long form YouTube essays, I would be remiss to not take another opportunity to mention Lindsay Ellis's nearly hour takedown of the Phantom of the Opera movie. So.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that is chef kiss.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, my final shout out though is a video game, a very short video game, but very interesting, called Paratopic. It is a surreal horror game stylized as a PlayStation 1 era video game. So 3D, but very rough pixelation. And it features a David Lynchian kind of narrative where you're shifting back between various vignettes, various scenes, and they're interconnected, but in very odd ways. And like you're in a diner, someone's telling you have a job, and then you cut to you're driving and there's a suitcase, but when you look away, it's not a suitcase, it's a gun. And yeah, so it's like playing these different kind of mini game or these little short levels and scenes, and then cutting to someplace else. And are you even the same person? Like, who knows? But like, you're smuggling VHS tapes that have weird supernatural effects, or are you? Yeah, it's very much my aesthetic. So, and again, it's a very short game, so you can get it done pretty quickly, especially even if you're going to 100% it. So, if you like that kind of weird horror, it's definitely something to check out. Jeff, you had one more shout out.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't sound like a plug, but I'm really digging Tabletopia these days. And for those that don't know what it is just an online gaming platform, but for what would otherwise be analog board games. There's over 1,000 titles in it. It's similar to Tabletop Simulator, but I think it has less access for just sort of random construction, and it's a little more formalized. It's got a lot of great titles. In fact, a lot of the big Kickstarters that are coming out now are putting up demos so you can play the games before kickstarting them. It's free to play. You can get an account and play most games. And even the games that aren't free often let 2 or 3 players play for free. And if you want to do 4 or 5 players, then you need a premium account. But then that's not that expensive. I think it's $9.99 a month. And as a premium member, you can invite non-premium members to play in your premium game. So it's just a great way, especially these days when you can't get together with your friends to play a game. You get to play. In fact, last weekend I played Scythe with 5 other people, 4 other people, and it does have kludgy elements. I mean, sometimes moving tokens or being a 3D component lost in the color background on the board can be a problem, but it's mitigated by the fact that you don't have to set anything up. You just push a button and the game is all set up, and you don't have to clean anything or put anything away, and just close the window and the game is put away. I really would recommend it if you're jonesing to play traditional board games, a lot of new titles, but can't do it because of COVID.
Yeah. I've heard good things about Tabletopia. I need to check it out sooner or later. I've just been, because I hear if one person pays for like a board game, then other people can play. If only the host of the game has to pay, is my understanding of it. So like you can't play for free. Yeah.
Yeah, you can play for free, and you can play many games for free without anybody with a premium account. And it's not per game; it's just per month. So it's $9.95 a month, and you can play as many of these games as you want.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, it's relatively cheap. I mean, if you look at the hour per fun, if you're really into it, it's pretty good, or price per hour, I guess.
Nice. Cool. Well, that's all we have for this episode. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all check out Blades in the Dark if you haven't already. If that sounds like your cup of tea or cup of ectoplasm. See what I did there? I incorporated game setting stuff. That's a thing in the game. We'll have some this fall. Some games of it, and be sure to keep your eye on Night Clerk Radio. We have some cool stuff for it. And also I'm at Ross Payton on Twitter if you want to go ask me questions about that, or RPPR. Of course, I'm on the RPPR Patreon Discord all the time, patreon.com/RPPR. Sign up for only $2 a month or more to get access to bonus podcasts, exclusive artwork, and access to our Discord where, again, I'm streaming weird videos every week. We're hanging out. It's a good time. And Jeff, how can people find you on the internets?
Biohazard Jeff on Twitter. I am also frequently on RPPR Discord, just kind of hanging out, or at least listening in. And also you can find our games at www.biohazardgames.us.
All right. Very cool. And Aaron, how can people message you on the internets?
You can always find me at Aaron Karsten on Twitter, and also at the Railery Podcast Streaming Twitch page. If you want to, where we're doing weekly streamings on Wednesday. We've been doing Hunt for the last couple of weeks, but we'll probably keep that as a co-op Chaos Night. Hopefully, we'll be doing something within this week, maybe just as an offset for like one shot. So if you have recommendations for games, just send me a message.
And Bill, you're just out there in the ether. Yeah.
Presence.
Bill is a ghost, a blade in the dark, as it will. A Bill in the dark. Yeah.
I may have a Twitter, but I would guarantee it is sat idle since approximately 2013.
Fair enough. But yeah, so we'll talk to you all